Good morning, everyone. And it is really just my greatest honor and privilege to be presenting the work of several hundred people who really put in countless hours in personal time and dedication towards the 8th edition. And on behalf of the entire editorial board and all those volunteers, I'm going to make this presentation. This work that has culminated into the 8th edition is the work of numerous people, and I am presenting a high-level summary on behalf of all these individuals. And what I wanted to do today is to outline the summary of changes to give you an overview of what's really new about the 8th edition, the launch process, and really some of the important next steps. So the journey to this 8th edition began in April of 2013. It was a retreat, the annual retreat of the AJCC Executive Committee. And from that date, we spent as a committee and then that a process that went on to become the editorial board, and spent a lot of time to really take a hard look at how 8th edition and just AJCC staging manual content is prepared. And so from April 2013 to September 2014, it might look like a long time, but a large amount of effort was spent into process, into how do we standardize this entire 8th edition content across all chapters. We realized that to make staging relevant, we had to embark on a journey that had already begun in the 7th edition and take it to a whole new level of making it into a precision medicine based approach in addition to the population-based approach. We realized that there is a responsibility that we as an editorial board had to the cancer community and to the patients, and we had to be transparent about our actions. And so we embarked on a very important culture of evidence-based medicine and to be transparent as to what drives changes in the AJCC. And a lot of time was spent into transforming the staging manual into the next era, into the era of electronic applications, content management, API, and some of the terms you have heard. That was almost a year's process. And following, so this was September 2014, at one of our annual meetings, I presented what the editorial board had done towards this. The real work began, and the launch was in September 2014. The expert panels were formed, very well constituted by the chairs and vice chairs into a multidisciplinary teams, and they began their work. Literature review, deliberations by phone calls, emails, web conferences, and face-to-face meetings. And these deliberations, which are innumerable and countless to account for, led to the formal staging recommendations. And all of these staging recommendations were reviewed by the entire editorial board to understand and make sure that there's a certain level of evidence behind this, a certain level of thinking. And after the editorial board approved these recommendations, the whole chapter writing process was undertaken. So let's take a look at where we were exactly last year, September 2014, last year. And we had this in order to map out this entire complex process, an oversimplified version, but just to give you an idea, and this is work done by Laura, who really had us conform to this process and made sure that we did this appropriately. You can see that in the green, what you see in the green, again, it's not the detail that matters, is that by September 14, all the teams, almost all the teams, the green means accomplished, the yellow is ongoing, almost all the teams had their face-to-face meeting. They had all had their deliberations, but the yellow is where the chapter writing was. And you can see that just 1 year ago, almost all chapters were yellow. That means the process had begun, but none of the chapters were completed. You can see red means that work was not done. So we were at that phase, high level of anxiety, but of course the optimism that we had put in place, a great process. But most importantly, we had superb leaders who were very committed to this process. And so beyond September last year, where we were here and saying, okay, everybody's now done the deliberations, let's write the chapters. This was what we had planned. And you'll see on the left side of the screen what was planned. In reality, what actually happened is that between October and we had hoped to get all the chapters by October 2015, but it really took some of the teams to get all the chapters in by March. And so between October and March, we received all the chapters. Each and every chapter was then reviewed by the editorial board and approved. The liaisons presented the changes and went back and forth with all the teams such that all the staging recommendations were endorsed by the editorial board. And miraculously, I use the term miraculously because in September we had no chapters, and in April every chapter was completed, edited, approved by the editorial board, and submitted to the publisher. So a phenomenal amount of work was done between September and April, and we had a commitment to submit the content to Springer by April 15th, and at 6 p.m. Laura sent the entire file electronically to the publishers. So very timely effort, and of course all the chairs and vice chairs had a very important role in this process. So having completed this, let's take a look at what is new in the 8th edition at a very high level, and sort of as you all represent the 8th edition out to the cancer community, what are the high level issues that are important? A lot of effort, as I said, the first year was on the organization, and one component of the organization was to make sure that the team was appropriate. We had a very expanded, as Dr. Bird said, expanded, committed editorial board. Just as a contrast, 6th edition had 7 editorial board members, and we really realized that in order to truly have that multidisciplinary participation and expertise, we needed many more. And so at the end, we had 19 members in the editorial board. Each of the expert panels were very, very carefully selected, the chairs, the vice chairs, and you can see that the composition of each expert panel constituted a wide representation of all the key stakeholders that are important for cancer staging. The concept, of course, Dr. Bird talked about, was integral to this process. We needed teams that could support the expert panels. And so Ken Hess and the evidence-based medicine statistics core, Carolyn Compton with the precision medicine core, Dan Sullivan with the imaging core, Jeff Gershenwald with the content harmonization core, and Kim Jessup and Donna with the data collection core were just examples of superb teams that supported the work of these expert panels. At the end of the day, this edition is like it takes the previous edition content and takes it to the next level. And so in the 8th edition, there are updated staging systems in several chapters. Every chapter that you see is updated in terms of content within it, and it's in a standardized fashion that I'll describe. There are updated illustrations, and one way to look at the 8th edition is that it is not only the manual, but it's actually the manual plus the atlas, and we've tried to make it into one product rather than have two separate products, because it's that one desktop reference that we would like all to have regarding staging. There are updated histologic classifications and updated histology cores. A lot of time was spent through the leadership of Jeff Gershenwald and the Content Harmonization Committee to look at the staging rules. And these have been looked at each edition, but this was a very comprehensive evaluation of the staging rules. And 15 physicians really constituted this content harmonization core. They had a line-by-line review of the staging rules. And the reason I emphasize this is we can all look at the staging manual and each chapter that is dear to us, but if one doesn't read this most important chapter, then the staging is lost. And I really want that message out, that the time and effort that has gone here, you recall last year that we had an entire harmonization summit. We vetted all the issues that were evolving, controversial. 60 physicians, registrars attended this conference. And at the end of all this, the deliberations of 4 years has resulted in a chapter that was 11 pages in the 7th edition is now 28 pages. And I so really strongly put a big plug in for the work, and of course gratitude to Jeff, Donna, and one of our editorial board members, Elliot Asari, who was a sort of a clinical scholar at the ACS, who put in this work on behalf of all of us. And this is a really major accomplishment of the 8th edition. And just one example of this is that the role of the managing physician, which is really not well and clearly elucidated, is now there, is outlined in this chapter. Content from this chapter is as follows. Staging requires collaborative efforts, and everybody who's involved in cancer care plays an important role. Pathologists, radiologists, they provide key information to T and M related information, and stage is ultimately defined from the synthesis of an array of patient history, physical examination findings, and supplemented imaging and pathology data. But very clearly stated, it is only the managing physician who can assign the patient stage, since she or he routinely has access to all the pertinent information from physical exam, biopsies, imaging, and other procedures. So this is one such very important concept and vision that is relayed to the general staging rules. And again, I urge everybody who's involved with staging to not only read the chapters that are important to them professionally, but to read these general staging rules. There are new features that we talked about, and David's talked about the levels of evidence, the imaging section, and this whole journey that we talked about yesterday, that is to take this staging content from a population-based to a more precision and individualized-based approach. So just a few words about evidence-based approach. Again, thanks to Ken Haas and his committee. They proposed the levels of evidence that were transparent to and known to all the chairs and vice chairs, and when they evaluated changes, they had to therefore propose the changes based on the levels of evidence. And as a sort of overarching statement, it is very appropriate to say that no changes to stage definitions, which is the most important changes, there's changes in content, prognostic factors, etc., was made on level 4 evidence. So we had really strong level of evidence, and it's all transparently mentioned in chapters. Data sources that are available to the cancer community were really looked at very closely, the NCDBs here. But what an important part of the 8th edition was to bring in multi-institutional databases and international databases, for example, in thorax and melanoma and many other organizations. And this evidence-based approach also forced us to critically look at what was published in the literature. Another important feature, and again, hats off here to Dan Sullivan and his entire group, was to make imaging an integral component of staging. Radiology and imaging has played an important role in imaging and in cancer staging, but this was the opportunity to make a clear statement and outline the role. In each chapter, you will see a consistent and broad overview of applications of imaging. There is guidance to the physicians, generally in terms of how tests are ordered because of several imaging modalities. And most chapters discuss this information, what's important and appropriate for assessing tumor stage information, the temporal order in which some of this information needs to be presented, and what are the specific T, N, and M parameters that can be extracted from the imaging report. These chapters also talk about structured reporting and link to references that are based on disease or specialty-based guidelines, and those are outlined in the imaging chapters, imaging sections in each chapter. Led by Carolyn Compton and the work of the precision medicine and the vision of the entire board, as I've stated, the aim was to take cancer stage as TNM-based approach to a much more comprehensive cancer profile, because cancer stage is just one important component of the decision-making process for patient management. And so we decided as an editorial board to work with the UICC and maintain the fundamentals of TNM staging, but then to bring in additional prognostic factors, which are now the stage groups that contain anatomic and non-anatomic factors, which we call prognostic stage groups, and that the journey of personalized medicine is built gradually by using prognostic factors for staging, risk assessment models, and clinical trial stratification. So these are the new features that are consistently added in each of the chapters. I'm going to go into in detail later on as to which aspects are in the manual versus those that are rolling updates and are going to be available online. So as one looks at the chapters, and there are 85 chapters, the overview of the chapters is as following. The front and center, if you open any chapter, the breast chapter or the prostate chapter, one will first find a summary of changes. This is, therefore, it's very clear, it's transparent as to what is new in the staging system. This is followed by introduction, standard information in each chapter consistent with previous editions, anatomy, rules for classification. The entire section of prognostic factors is divided into three. Prognostic factors required for stage grouping, those required for clinical care, and those that are emerging for clinical care. And this section is available only online, so it's a web-only presentation. Risk assessment models that Dr. Compton talked about yesterday, and recommendations of prognostic factors to be included in clinical trials section. In terms of the TNM, each chapter very clearly defines the T, N, and M parameters, followed by stage grouping. And an important sort of aspect that is important for you is that the term stage grouping is now called the AJCC prognostic stage group. So when we talk about stage groups, the more formal way to address this, and this is across all chapters, is that they are all now called AJCC prognostic stage grouping. Followed by this is the data that needs to be collected, the grade of the tumor, histologic type, survival data, and bibliography. Very consistently through all the chapters, we have used color coding. This was done in the 7th edition. In blue boxes, you will see the T criteria, the N criteria are color-coded, and the colors are not showing very well, but on the screen, or if at least not on my screen here, but actually when I look at it, you'll see the yellow is the N criteria, M the green criteria. Whenever we talk about histologic grade, it's in a purple box, and most importantly, the AJCC prognostic stage groups are peach type of color, standardized throughout all the text. Now, in the 8th edition, you will see that because of the inclusion of non-anatomic factors, there's increased complexity. Here's just an example. In the 7th edition, this is how the breast prognostic stage groups look. And you can see there's a single table that occupies one section of one page. Moving on to the 8th edition, thanks to the work of Dr. Gabe Ortobayaji, you can see that this is what was a single section is now this, that continues on to 5 pages. So the complexity has increased, and this complexity is necessary because it is important for patient care and to keep cancer relevant. Of course, not all staging tables are this complex, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of what is the most complex in the staging manual, and that is the update in breast cancer classification. We talked about it last night. Each and every chapter starts by, in the beginning, the summary of changes and a very transparent presentation, as you will see, of the levels of evidence with prognostic factors, and you can see how these prognostic factors are written. There are 12 new staging systems and new chapters, the chapter on organization, risk assessment models, and some of the new chapters yesterday, and here's a listing of all the new chapters that are available in this manual. Some of the chapters that we had previously are now split for better organization and based on the pattern of care that is provided, and here's a listing of all the split chapters, and split meaning compared to the 7th edition. Some of the chapters are merged, so you can see that, and this primarily occurs in the GYN track. I see Dr. Much and Alex are here, and they've done phenomenal work in this area. And we also wanted to outline what is not in the 8th edition. Not present in the 8th edition is the chapter on cutaneous squamous cell carcinoma and other carcinomas. This was a deliberation by the editorial board based on the recommendation of the skin committee that this is not as relevant as was presented in the 7th edition. And so the cutaneous squamous cell carcinoma is dropped, although cutaneous head and neck carcinoma is the work that the head and neck team took and is a new contribution. Collaborative stage data collection is not part of the 8th edition, and staging forms will not be in the manual, though they will be available online. There are new paradigms that the 8th edition has embarked, and this is sort of just an opening as to how in future, in addition to the TNM base, we'll be potentially looking at disease. Dr. Lydia and Jatin Shah led the work with Brian O'Sullivan on the HPV-associated oropharyngeal carcinomas, and this, as was presented yesterday, is a major way in which oropharyngeal carcinomas will be looked at and then stratified. There are separate staging systems, and this is for the first time, and really quite a controversial aspect from the editorial board, but clearly important for patient management, is that there are separate staging systems for neoadjuvant therapy in esophagus and stomach. The bone and soft tissue sarcomas, there are separate systems for anatomic sites. These were previously all lumped together. In the ophthalmic group, a very major sort of new area, and we might see more of this in other cancers in future editions, is the introduction of an H category. So we all understand T, N, and M, but H is the hereditary cancer, and the importance of the hereditary trait in retinoblastoma is added. So there's a T, N, and M and H version in retinoblastoma. And as presented yesterday by Dan Lin, there are non-anatomic factors that determine prognosis such that you can get an organ-confined disease, but there are increasing numbers of cancers that are now stage 3, even though they are organ-confined diseases. So this is just a flavor of some of the new areas that the 8th edition has gone. In addition to the manual, there is online content, and the online content contains supplementary material that is outlined here. And we really want to help you all understand the importance of the web, and want to spread the message that www.cancerstaging.org is going to be revamped, is going to have much more information, and will be an important source of continual updates in the AJCC. This work, as Dr. Bird mentioned, could not be done without the volunteer and expert recognition. And so the important task that the editorial board did was to really recognize their work up and front and center in the staging manual. And so each of the sections has a list of all the expert panel members. So before we even start chapters, the entire expert panel membership is listed. And when one looks at a particular chapter, you will see, as you will see here on top, all the authors that participated in writing the chapter are outlined here. And we felt that this academic recognition was important to the countless hours and the expertise that the volunteers lent to us. There's also very clear information of which cancers can and cannot be staged using that system, and that's in the box below, and it's again front and center as you open each chapter. So here's how the 8th edition book is going to look like, and in 3 weeks we should have copies for the editorial board and executive committee, and all of you can get access to the AJCC staging manual through many avenues that I'm going to talk about. But by October 1, you could all have this on your desk. This edition is about 1,000 pages, has 512 illustrations, and in addition to this manual, there are these supplemental online resources that we talked about. Just a little comparison to make you understand that this is just not an update of another source, and that really it's important that one has to have a new manual in order to really be involved with cancer care beginning from 2017. The AJCC 7th edition was a 3-year project led by Dr. Edge, and just phenomenal work from the 6th edition of Dr. Green, 57 chapters, 16 task forces. And when you compare that to the 8th edition, this is a 3-year project, again, 83 chapters, 18 expert panels, and 7 cores. We've expanded the contributions of individuals from almost 300 to 450, from 6 continents, 22 countries, and about 184 institutions worldwide. So truly a international representation, multidisciplinary, and very comprehensive. In terms of content, you can see that there are now over 1,000 pages. In contrast to 93 illustrations, we have 512 illustrations. There's API information that Dr. Bird has talked about. And the staging forms were part of the 650 pages in the staging manual. And I present this information to really explain to you all and to inform you that this manual is content rich. We do not have the staging forms, and so if you took out the 200 staging forms and now you have 1,000 pages, you really land up with twice the number of pages and about 5 times the illustrations compared to the 7th edition. So we really want the message out that, yes, there's a new way to classify cancer, and it's in the 8th edition of the AJCC staging manual. The API product that Dr. Bird talked about, the single source content, is an important development, and this image was shared where all the expert panels did their work on SharePoint, created Word documents. This entire Word document was then put into this entire content management system, and I'm just going to show you 1 or 2 slides regarding that, but then you'll see the importance of that content management system is that it allows for application programming interface, and to not only create the staging manual, but as I click, you'll see that there's a potential to create additional derivative products. And the editorial board is now in the process of identifying what those derivative products are. And so the investment in the API is not only for quality and fidelity of data, but the ability and the nimbleness for the AJCC to create these derivative products. At a very high level, here's a chapter, a certain area. I'm just taking, for example, what happens in content management. Here's an area that is highlighted. It is then converted into this machine-readable format, the data XML, and so it looks like from the text version into something that is computer jargon, and allows the API to take specific text and then really extract and make it into any of the derivative products that the AJCC is planning. So the licensing and delivery of this content has now been shared with our professional organizations that need the update, the UICC, and other licensing agreements with major stakeholders, the CAP, NCCN, et cetera, is occurring. The content is being made available to vendors through the API. And we want this opportunity to spread the word out that if you are aware of vendors that would be interested in the API, please contact the AJCC, or if you go onto the website, there is a very specific link on the website which is API vendor, and we would like more and more vendors to use this because the fidelity of the content and the quality will be preserved through this API. It's a huge investment by the 8th edition. So in terms of the release, we expect that all of you can have the staging manuals ordered and available to you by October 1. Between October 1 and January is the time to get familiar with this 8th edition content because the 8th edition changes are effective for clinical care on January 1, 2017. Printed copies, so because it's important, we just wanted to highlight that printed copies are available can be ordered through Springer and Amazon, and here are some links. There are these flyers, and we'd like, at break, we will present these to you. So if you would like to take some of these home, we've prepared these, and we would like more and more people to have access to the staging manual and purchase them. The editorial board has not only sort of finished the formal task of the 8th edition, but we are looking at this cancer staging process as a continual and iterative process. And we just, at a very high level, try to understand what is it that it is going to take in terms of maintaining the staging content. So if you look at staging manuals, at an average, the staging manuals are published every 5 to 6 years. Though we feel that the way that the data and science and medicine is evolving, this is going to take a much greater effort than every 6 years. At this point, we're not quite sure how the iterative models will be rolled out, but this is clearly on our radar, and we'd like your input as to how we could be doing it. But we have a written commitment that in the 8th edition that we will have rolling updates for prognostic factors for clinical care, emerging factors, risk assessment models, cancer staging forms, etc. So it is our vision to not just stop at this point, but to continue building staging content for the future. This is a continual process which the editorial board is committed to, and there's going to be further discussion in spring of next year. It's very important for us to hear from you as to what went right for you, what we could do better, and so a survey will be sent out, and this will help us plan the future of cancer staging. And in a position such that in next year by this time, the leadership will be able to present how staging will evolve in the future. Finally, each AJCC staging manual has a dedication. Each year, an important individual who has had a role in staging is recognized. The 7th edition, which was the prior edition, recognized Dr. Fleming, was a past chair of the AJCC. And this year we took a little different tack. We had so many people and individuals to recognize, but there's a body of professionals who we thought deserved this recognition at this time, because the work done by the cancer registrars was clearly important. It not only, I mean, we as physicians take this and extend it to clinical care, but passionate users of the AJCC in terms of taking our clinical care and helping us look at the impact of the clinical care was the registrars. And so to recognize the registrar's commitment to education and unique commitment to recording and maintaining the data that physicians produce, their professionalism in collecting the data, the dedication in cataloging this information, and the leadership and support and promulgating the principles of cancer stage was recognized in the 8th edition. And we're truly, as an editorial board, grateful to the cancer registrars for this work, and we dedicate this to them. Finally, just a big thank you. The work that is done here, and I just gave you an overview, is the work of innumerable people. I'd like to extend first a thanks to the entire editorial board. These are the 18 members listed here. Not only did they constantly provide advice, but each of the editorial board members were liaisons to expert panels. They were highly engaged, very motivated. We, in fact, did some calls even on the weekend, and so that was a level not only of their work, but also to come together, and they were most generous with their time and expertise. As repeated multiple times, and I wanted to extend my personal heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Winchester and the entire staff. I'd like to single out Donna Gress for her technical expertise, but someone who Dr. Bird said without whom we could not have done this entire manual, and that's our managing editor who actually managed the editor-in-chief, and that's Laura Meyer. She really did a phenomenal job, and thanks to them. So all of them went above and beyond the call of duty, countless hours, and dedicated and committed. Again, this work could not be done without the expert panel chairs and vice chairs, all the members of the course, and so here I just want to formally recognize that this effort was truly because of all these individuals. We want to recognize the NCDB and the individuals who gave us access to the data, our illustrator, Alice Chen, and our copy editors who were very instrumental, because this was a process that the AJCC undertook itself rather than farming that out to Springer. Finally, in previous years, we had this information that we shared with you in terms of transparency, in terms of effort. You can see that this is a completely transformed product, but just to take an objective look at how much time and effort and what was involved in the 8th edition. There were 25 committees, 88 subcommittees. So when you take like individual chapters, you took upper GI, there's esophagus and stomach, and then in that there were sub-teams, anatomy, biomarkers, etc. There were 521 total seats on the panels, 434 individual contributors. We had 420 initially, but by the time we finished, 434, 188 institutions, 38 subspecialties. Since the launch time, this is just since the launch in October of 2014, we've had multiple training opportunities, webinars, 16 live webinars were offered, several views on YouTube. There's an expert panel orientation, a retreat for them. Again, that was recorded. Overall, there were 444 events between October and November of October of 2014 and November of 2016. 205 total polls that Judy conducted just to get meetings in order. There were 492 call and meeting hours. And before I even present this data, I mean, this is already phenomenal work, but this doesn't take into account the countless hours that went above and beyond. This is what we could record and show and share with you. There's a combined over 5,000 volunteer hours. And if you were to really look at it, that's almost 680 work days and about 140 work weeks. So this effort, this huge contribution to cancer care was only enabled by these countless hours, and this is just to show you the work that was put in by each and every person involved with this staging question. So finally, it is an honor on October 1. I hope you will all have a copy at your desk. And at the end of the day, this work was motivated by the cancer patient and the physicians who take care of the cancer patient. And it is truly, truly an honor for all of us involved to work on their behalf. And so to them, we are very, very grateful, and to you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mahul.
We'll take questions.
Great presentation. I think we have to hold on questions. Come up between the breaks if you have specific questions for Dr. Amin. So we're switching to our session, our speaker panel and speakers, and we want to have all three presenters go ahead and give their talks. And then we have a break where we're going to be collecting the 3x5 cards that you all are going to fill out. You all are going to fill out during the talks of questions to direct to the speakers. Now, all of you should have a 3x5 card in front of you. Feel free to write more than one question. You can use the back of the card. If you need more cards, let us know. But please write down your questions legibly. And if you'll put down the initials of the speaker you want the question to go to, we're going to collect those during the break and have an interactive session up front with our speakers plus 2 of our volunteers from AJCC leadership for the interactive session. Those of you on the webinar, please put your questions through on the chat line. Donna Gress is going to record those on a 3x5 card. So that's going to be how we're going to run this session. And without using up any more time with my talk, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lisa Richardson, who's our first speaker. Lisa comes to us from the CDC, and as far as I can tell, you do a lot of things. You're the director of the Division of Cancer Prevention and Control, and you oversee 4 huge areas that I can tell. Probably the one you're going to speak about maybe the most is the NPCR component of that. But our speakers selected or invited were based on how does staging impact the government and surveillance communities, what's the impact on the private sector and industry support of staging, and then from the academic and clinician point of view. So that's the way our speakers were invited, and I think they know why they were invited. So we got kind of the pick of the litter from these areas, and I really want to thank all 3 of our speakers in advance. So Dr. Lisa